This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And folks, my guest today, I had a hard time looking him up because every time I clicked in his name, I kept getting videos and images from a Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins movie, But we got the real deal here. I have filmmaker excuse me, Joe Black. I almost said Jack Black. Joe Black. How do you do, Joe?
Doing all right. Don't worry about it. I used to work at Blockbuster, and my name was on my badge, and every single customer for years and years was either like the movie and or like Jack Black. So you just that was just like a blast from the past there. That's all that was.
Did
So
you they have a sign up front saying meet Joe Black?
no,
You were
no,
in
they did
there?
not. Although if anybody could play me though, it would be Brad Pitt in the mid '90s. So that makes sense. So
There you go. There
yep.
you go. Well, you know what? You come under my limelight. I had Ron Thompson on last year and we talked about American Pop. And then I get an email from him this year, and I was come right out of nowhere, and he was like, "Absolutely, I'm interested." And I was like, "Is he answering an old email?" or what? I was like, "You know what? I'll have him back on. I'll have him back on." I listened to the first interview I did with him, and I was like, "Okay." I mean, I'm not going to say no. I'll have him back on, absolutely. So it was he probably read an old email and just responded to that. But he came on and he was like, "Yeah, I kind of recognized you when you come on screen there." And I said, but I did a second interview with him, but I did a little more research on him, and your name popped up a lot in his
Mhm.
filmography. And we got talking about that, and he recommended I get in touch with you. So I thought, you know what? Why not? Absolutely, and talk about all these films. But of course, I've had Ralph Bakshi on here a couple of times, and that's what, of course, led to Ron Thompson. So uh, talk about getting connected with Ron and bringing him back into the spotlight here.
Well, American Pop was my connection to him as well.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite films. I'm trying to remember. I believe it was like Star Trek First Contact, one of the Star Trek movies when it came out on VHS. We rented it, and there was a trailer beforehand for American Pop, which was finally getting its like home video release. And it was one of those trailers that just like changed my life. And yeah, I absolutely love that movie. And in January of 2013, my girlfriend at the time had bought me a Christmas gift, which was tickets to go see a double feature of American Pop and heavy metal at the Egyptian Theater here in Hollywood. And I went, and Ron was just there in the lobby, and I introduced myself to him, and he was like, "How do you recognize me?" Like I don't, because in that movie he's fucking cartoon, but
Hmm.
just lifelong fan, and he spoke that night, and I actually sat with him for the movie, and I sat with him and Muse Small, who's also in the film, um and with William Finley's wife, and William Finley had just passed away pretty recently at that
The
point
Phantom
too.
of the Paradise. Yeah.
So yeah, another one of my absolute favorites. So it was kind of and that was early in my time here in LA. I moved to LA in October of 2012. So this is, oh, I guess it was 2014 actually, January 2014. So about a year into it. So like it was kind of a cool surreal night. And I was just about to start on a film I was making called Hate Horses. It was a Western idea that I had. I had met this comedian out here. She had auditioned for a short film that my producer and I had made about Gary Glitter called Real
Hmm.
Glitter. She had auditioned to play Stevie Nicks, and she was like the complete opposite of Stevie Nicks, but she was just so interesting and weird that we wrote a project around her. And after meeting Ron and him talking that night about how he wanted to get back into acting, I wrote a part for Ron with him in mind, and I sent it to him, and he got back to me. He really liked it, and he was he said he was amazed that to be offered a part that wasn't an old guy dying in a retirement home, because like apparently like that's like all anybody had been offering him for like 10 years. He's like, you hit a
Hmm.
certain age and everybody just offers you a, the dying guy in a retirement home or something who's looking back on his life. And the character I wrote for Ron was like this big kind of flamboyant villain. Like he was like the main, antagonist of the piece, I guess. And he came on board with that, and so did Paul Dooley and Dominique Swain. And this was like my first. That was my. I want to say it was my sixth feature film that I had made, but it was my first feature film where I was working with like veteran actors.
Yeah.
And Ron and I, we just got along well working on it. And after that, I just keep making stuff. I never stop making stuff. And I just kept having Ron come back as often as I could. And I think by now we've done at least 7 movies
Oh,
together.
he loves it, I'll
Um,
tell you that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel very fortunate to be working with Ron because there's a lot of actors who are so specific.
Hmm.
They're it's a very specific kind of uh, performance that Ron gives, and people don't really know what to do with that 9 times out of 10. They're just like, what, like when they don't, especially like a writer director, like when they don't hear exactly what they pictured when they wrote something, they like reject it inherently, and Ron, I mean, he's out there, you know what I mean? I mean, you look at his performance in American Pop and, especially as Pete, you're just like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, that's so crazy, but it's so felt that I don't know, I just think it's magnetic, and the first time I wrote for Ron, when I wrote Hate Horses, I kind of wrote it knowing kind of like his earlier work. And since then I've been able to just write, getting to know Ron, I've been able to write and stretch Ron in certain directions that I haven't seen him do before. And that kind of like hit its apex in 2019. We did a movie called Tellers, where Ron plays like a retired cop who's now a private eye, a drunk living on a boat,
Hmm.
and that's unlike anything he's ever done before. And it was only because we had developed like a kind of trust with each other after working together for half a decade at that point that I was able to write it, let alone direct it. So.
What was it like working with Paul Dooley and Dominique Swain?
um, Paul Dooley, I used to work at ArcLight Hollywood. It
Hmm.
was a pretty popular theater here before the lockdown. It's where the Cinerama Dome was, and he used to come in all the time. And I had at ArcLight, you had to wear a badge that had your favorite movie on it,
Uh-huh.
like your name and your favorite movie. And I used to swap mine out. I had 3 different ones, so like any given day, I would swap it out. The 3 that I had were Phantom of the Paradise,
Yeah.
Popeye, and
Popeye.
yeah, and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Those were the 3
I
that I
saw
would
Popeye
alternate.
at the
And
drive-in when I was 8 years old, and yep, and I remember he was wimpy.
yeah, well, we actually um for its 35th anniversary, um no, it wasn't 35th. It was some kind of, I forget what the anniversary was specifically, but the guy who was like the general manager of the Chinese theater, he knew that I knew Paul Dooley, and so we coordinated together. We coordinated this big event for it, and we actually got Paramount to finally make a 4K scan of their print because they hadn't done it yet. It wasn't on Blu-ray or anything,
Hmm.
and we actually like coordinated together to make that happen. So there is a 4K scan of Popeye now. Hopefully, a 4K can come out. It's a very underrated movie. But Paul used to come in all the time, and I would talk to him every now and then. And one time I mentioned A Perfect Couple, the movie, the Robert Altman film, A Perfect Couple,
Hmm.
and he's like, I can't believe you've seen that movie. And I was like, well, I'm a big Ted Neely fan. And he was like, Ted Neely? And he's like, oh, you must be a director then. Because Ted Neely's been in like 4 movies. You know, he was Jesus and Jesus Christ Superstar. And he's in Perfect Couple. He was in Django Unchained. He's one of the guys who works for Leo. Um,
Okay.
but uh, but I was like, yeah, I'm a director. And he goes, well, do you have a project that I would be good for? And I was like, and I was a week out from shooting 8 Horses. And I was like, sure, you want to play this guy? And yeah, Paul hopped on board and he did it. And he uh, he did it for a very agreeable rate and was just super supportive. We picked him up from his place in Burbank, and he came out and did half a day for us, and couldn't have been better. And Dominique was excellent to work with on that project. She was a friend of a friend. I had an actress lined up to play this part, and then her father became ill, so she had to leave and couldn't do the part. And I was scrambling to find somebody, and my friend was like, "Well, I know Dominique Swain," and it's like, "What? Like, how did you just pull that out of your pocket?" You know what I mean? Like, Lolita, um, and uh, and Dominique. Not only did she come on board, but she's like, "I have my own costume I can bring," and she was there on time, and she was like, "I always knew where she was at on set." She shot for 2 days with us, and she was terrific. And I ended up we've almost worked together a couple times since then. It's just trying to find uh the right fit again. But yeah, it was an incredible experience, and it was a nice little bit of revenge against my ex-girlfriend, because my ex-girlfriend, her Dominique Swain was her favorite actress. She really liked the movie Pumpkin. And so it was like a nice little bit of like ex revenge to have Dominique Swain in my movie.
Well, she was also in, yeah, I'm looking here, Face Off. Like,
Hmm.
I interviewed somebody from Face Off, so wow, okay.
Yep.
I just getting a look at her on here because like I knew the name and it's like, okay, now I know who she is.
Yeah, Tart and Pumpkin and Face Off and Lolita, those are kind of her like
Yeah.
her bigger, you know, to-dos. But yeah, she's a lot of fun, and she shows up, which is, like when you're working at the level that I'm working at, that's like the main thing you need is you need people to show up. So
Well, let's go back to the beginning because I was looking through your filmography and your first film listed here is in 2008, Doable. Now, if that was your first film, talk about going into your first film. Were you nervous? What were your preparations? How did you get your foot in the door doing this film? Because it sounds like an
uh
interesting premise.
yeah, Doable was not my first film, actually. My first
Okay.
film was a movie. It was called Another. I went to film school in Jacksonville, Florida, Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. And during winter break in my senior year, I just took a bunch of the film equipment out of the film locker, and my friends and we shot what is now called a mumblecore movie. But there wasn't really a name for it at the time, and we called it Another. And it was a musical, and it was like
Okay.
90 minutes long, and we kind of improvised the whole thing. We like made an outline, but we just kind of improvised the whole thing as we made it. And I really liked that movie quite a bit. And the people in my film school, they were kind of mad that I took the equipment without asking. Then they saw the movie and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, you actually made a movie. That's pretty cool." And so they were very supportive of it. But all copies of that are gone, unfortunately. I still have the raw footage, so I could probably piece it back together one of these days when I find some time. But I really
Okay.
like that one. Doable, I made a few years later. I
Okay.
had graduated at that point, and I was trying to. I never wanted to jump right into the industry. Like I knew that I wanted to be a writer and director, but I didn't want to like. I wanted to be good at what I did first. You
Okay.
know what I
Yep.
mean? Like
Yep.
I wanted to be worth people's time. And
Mm-hmm.
by people's time, I mean investors, I mean my crew, I mean my cast, I mean the guy printing my fucking scripts, and I mean the audience. Like I mean everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be worth everybody's time. Because everybody wants to make a movie, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
the vast majority of those people are just selfish and wasting other people's time. And so my whole plan was I wanted to make 10 movies to figure out how before throwing my hat in the ring. And another was kind of, like I said, like a mumblecore thing where we just kind of threw something together. I wanted to make a movie that was pretty like I just wanted to do something kind of basic, something very simple, something that like you see in a movie theater on a Friday night, you know. And
Hmm.
I had the premise, about this nymphomaniac, super Christian nymphomaniac trying to kick her sex addiction. Like that just
Yeah.
sounded like a rom-com. This is like right after, like this is like at the birth of Apatow where I like start writing this. So this is
Uh-huh.
um this is like I started writing it in early 2007, and then we shot it in 2008. You know what I mean? So this is like post 40-Year-Old Virgin, Clerks 2, and pre Knocked Up when I'm coming up with it. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and I love Knocked Up and I love 40-Year-Old Virgin, but I wasn't so into the improv thing for my stuff. Like I wanted to be more of an auteur in that way. Now I think
Hmm.
Knocked Up is a masterpiece. Like I don't want anybody to misunderstand. I think Knocked Up is a legit masterpiece, but I knew that that wasn't the route for me. I wanted to write. You know what I mean? The writing was I've written over 500 screenplays, and
Hmm.
and so that was just kind of like getting down to the basics. Like I wanted to make just something very simple, digestible, and I got together about $8,000. Half of it was in savings bonds that my great grandmother had been giving me since I was born, and then the other half was I got the cast and crew together a couple of times, and we did these gigantic garage sales. Um, that where we took up this entire field, almost like a mini like farmers market or flea market, as we call them where I'm from, and yeah, we got about $8,000 and we shot it, and I hated it. I when it was done, I just hated the movie. I just like I thought it was just so nothing. But then we released it and in theaters in my hometown, and it was really successful. Like we sold out a couple screenings here and there, and everybody just like loved the movie. And and that just kind of like pissed me off because I was like, this movie's nothing, like so the next movie, and then everybody in my hometown in Jacksonville, they like people wanted to make movies with me, like all these people who wanted to make movies. They're like, dude, let's do something. You're a doer, let's do it. And I don't know that I did it intentionally, but my next movie I wanted to like it was totally different from doable. It was like an exploitation horror movie,
Hmm.
and called The Hatchet Sisters,
Yep.
and it was a period piece set in the '60s, and I went around looking for money from like local investors in Jacksonville because Doable had been such a hit, and none of them would give me any money.
Oh,
Like
wow.
yeah, they wouldn't give me anything, and the ones who even entertained the idea, they were like, "Well, don't you have another rom-com, like another romantic comedy?" I'm like, "Really? Like I'm already like having to face this battle. Like you just
Yep.
want me to make another rom-com? You don't. So I took out a loan from my aunt um, of $1,000 to make
Hmm.
this period piece horror movie, and I spent half of it on plane tickets to fly out my producer DP. So we made that movie for $500,
Oh,
and
wow.
that one. That one I loved. I really loved Hatchet Sisters. And when we did our big premiere for it, I was very excited. I introduced the movie, and then halfway through the movie, I got so sick and tired of seeing people get up and walk out that I went and I just sat in the front row because I couldn't handle like the exodus that was happening. Um, and I thought we had failed. And then at the end of the movie, like when all the shit hits the fan, chaos reigns, the people who were left were like really into the movie. Like people
Hmm.
were like cheering and jumping up and down. And I was like, oh, so we've made a cult movie already. You know what I mean? Even in this. And I got up to do a Q&A afterward, and the first question somebody asked was it supposed to be funny? And I was like, oh. But yeah, those were my first two, and I only made one more in Jacksonville before deciding that I needed to come out to LA to start working with, because it was great working with friends and family. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Yep.
it's wonderful. Like they're the people who inspire me. So like why not actually work with them when I make these movies? But it got to the point where the writing and the directing were not, like my writing was surpassing my directing, and my
Hmm.
ambition was surpassing my resources. Um, So I decided to move out to Florida after making my next film, which was Yellow Bellies, which I made in Florida. I decided to move from Florida to LA to start working with people who were on the same path as me, people who were looking to be a part of this industry and do it as their careers.
Okay. Well, we talked about Ron Thompson, but you've also looking at, for instance, Tellers, you had Elizabeth Daily in that from Valley Girl. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
yeah. What was it like working with her?
She's actually in a few of my movies. I When I was in film school, I used to make lists of people that I wanted to work with, and
Hmm.
my whole life I've wanted to work with Corinne Bohr, who she was in like Police Academy 4, and she was on the early '90s Flash TV show. She played Prank. Um, I've always loved her since I was a little kid, and so she was always on my list. And then when I was junior year of film school, I saw Better Off Dead,
Hmm.
and E.G. Daily. She does a performance in that where she sings the title song, and I just thought she was terrific. And I just made a note that like I want to work with E.G. Daily, like because I knew her of course as like Tommy Pickles or whatever. I had never seen Pee Wee's Big Adventure though, and
Uh-huh.
she was Dottie in that. I'd never seen that, but so her and Corinne Bohr both. Every time I would write a script, I would always write a part that either for both of them or for one of them. Like I would always write with them in mind, not ever thinking I could get a hold of them or anything. But I made a movie. I was going to make a movie in 2017 called Jenna, and this is when I was trying to like up my game at this point. Jenna was my 11th film,
Hmm.
and so I wanted to like get to the next level. I wanted to start working with professionals, and I already had John Grice on board for that movie. The guy who played
Yeah.
Uncle Rico
Uncle
in
Rico.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I was trying to get some name talent into the movie, and I was like, let's finally make a go for E.G. Daily. We couldn't find any contact for her. We couldn't get through to her people, so I ended up casting another actor who um, she's been in a few things herself, but she and I we just didn't quite see eye to eye on that script. We got along really well, like as people, but like just artistically, we were seeing two different things for this movie, let alone the part. And she backed out less than a week before we were supposed to shoot her scene, and so I was kind of up shit creek. And the day she backed out, my buddy invited me to the New Beverly Cinema to Quentin Tarantino's theater, and we went, and they were playing Valley Girl,
Hmm.
and E.G. Daily was there. So I literally like grabbed my script out of the car, and after I was like, "Here, like have this." And she read it. We went next door. She took a look at it. She read it, and she did, right there, she was like, "I'm in. Like I'm in 100%." She came and did a rehearsal with the whole crew a couple days later, and she showed up and knocked it out of the park. We only had her for a day, and we just got along great. And everything I did for the next couple of years, she was always like either a part of or we talked about having her be a part of it. And her daughter, Hunter, is actually also in Tellers.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and- yeah, and her daughter is really, really talented. And we actually like after I met her daughter and like talked about the part, she had a cool grasp of the story. So we actually kind of like grew the character for her. Like her character originally had like 1.5 scenes, but we actually kind of turned her into like a through line throughout the whole movie. Um, but yeah, and EG is always very supportive. She's been terrific. Um,
Ab-
and I did actually end up getting to meet Corinne Bohr uh, about a year or so later on my next movie I made, Chicks Man. Um, my AD on that movie, Jess, when we were in a pre-production meeting, she was like, "Hey, I have to go early. I have to go walk my friend Corinne's dog." And I was like, "Who? Corinne Bohr?" And she was like, "How do you know that?" And apparently Jess knew Corinne, and I've been trying to reach out to Corinne for 10 years. And so we invited Corinne to that movie, and she loved it. And she was like, "Whatever you're doing next." have like sign me up. And so Corinne is also in Tellers. Um, and Corinne is still like one of my absolute favorite actresses and people. And she was also in Natasha Hall as well. Um, and I think we're gonna work together again real soon. I love Corinne. She's the best.
Yeah, and of course you got to work with Dwayne Whitaker out of Pulp Fiction as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of those serendipitous kind of things. Do you know the filmmaker Damon Packard?
No, no, I don't.
Yeah, he's an underground guy, and his movies are out there. Like I highly recommend them. Especially Fatal Pulse and Reflections of Evil.
Okay.
Damon is a friend of mine, and for months he kept telling me like, you got to meet my buddy Dwayne, the guy from Pulp Fiction. He's like, I think you two would be, a couple peas in a pod. And for months it just never worked out. And I was shooting Natasha Hall. I was a couple weeks into the shoot, and finally it just worked out to where I could finally meet up with Damon and Dwayne. And I met with Dwayne, and Damon was right. Dwayne and I, we just like clicked instantly. He's a good old boy. You know what I mean? And his hands have been in so many pies that you wouldn't even know. Like he's such a rich well of Hollywood history. And and while I was meeting him for the first time, I was thinking, damn it, man, I wish I had met this guy a few months ago. He'd be great for this character, Mickey Simpson in Natasha Hall. And we were going to be shooting that the next day, this Mickey Simpson scene. I was like, damn. Well, the next day when it came time to shoot the Mickey Simpson scene, the actor I had hired just didn't show up. He just,
Wow.
yeah, did not show up. No, no, no call, no show, as they say in the retail business. And and so I called Dwayne that night and I said, "Hey, I had had this guy who blah blah, and I think you'd be good for it. What do you think?" And he said, "Send me the script." A week later, he came to shoot, and actually, his scene that we had to film, we had to shoot it super early, so we had a 6 a.m. call time, and we were going to shoot under this bridge here in Pasadena. And
Hmm.
so we show up to the bridge with him in the car, and my wife and my AD. We all show up in this car uh, under the bridge, and there's another film crew just under the bridge, like a professional like TV film crew. So like we ended up having to cancel the shoot that day, and we had to bring Dwayne back another time to finally finish that out. Um, and Dwayne has grown to be a very very good friend of mine, and I loved his take on the character. So when we made the sequel to Natasha Hall earlier this year, um, I brought his character back and gave him like an extended section of the movie. He gets a lot more to do in Suffrage. So when that comes out, I think that's going to be out hopefully in like November. Um, you'll get to see quite a performance out of him. He's a good time.
Yeah,
Um, really really good.
I've interviewed Steve Hibbert, who played the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. So I haven't had Dwayne on
Okay.
yet, but we have talked about Dwayne, and I'll tell you, Steve likes to
Oh yeah.
laugh.
Mhm.
The Gimp is a funny
Well,
guy underneath that costume.
yeah, and he lives in Denver, right? If I'm not mistaken, he lives like near Denver or something like that. So like I think he's done a couple conventions here lately with Dwayne. I've never met him
Oh,
actually, but
meet him if you get a chance. He's
yeah.
got
Well, I'd say
okay.
the same about Dwayne.
Okay. He said to me the two greatest things of his life is his family and number two, becoming an action figure. But I asked him, I said, how many times in the run of a day does your wife say to your kid, bring out the gimp? And he says, more times than you can know.
That's
Oh, he
funny.
had a good sense of
That's good.
humor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. Uh, um, nope. I love Pulp Fiction. I saw that in the theater when that came out, actually. So, yeah. But,
That's actually kind of a funny, not it's a point of not contention, but like we like to pick at each other that I'm actually not a big fan of Pulp Fiction. Um, but I love the Bruce Willis storyline. I think that storyline is like solid, like I and it's just everything on either side of it that I'm not crazy about. I do like the diner stuff too. The book ends with the diner.
Mm-hmm.
But the two Travolta stories, I'm just not into them. But I love Tarantino. Like, don't get me wrong. But the Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, those are not my cup of tea.
Oh
But
wow.
everything else, yeah, I mean, but I adore everything since Inglorious Bastards. I think is like top tier filmmaking,
Okay.
and I think the Jackie Brown is like one of the greatest films ever made, if not the best movie ever made, out of Hollywood at least. Um, Especially, I mean, the performances that he got in that movie. You know what I mean? Like the
Mm-hmm.
the, the performances in that movie. Robert Forster in that movie. That's like, if you were to ask me what's the best like male performance in a movie ever, he comes to mind. Like him in that movie. So,
I saw Jackie
but Pulp
Brown in
Fiction,
the
yeah,
theater too. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's like the dream movie. Like when we made Natasha Hall, I was pitching it to people as it's Jackie Brown meets Inherent Vice. Like that's
Okay.
that's what I was trying to make. And actually, Dwayne is not the only Pulp Fiction alumni in Natasha Hall. We also have Angela Jones, who played Esmeralda Villalobos, the cab driver.
Oh,
In
oh wow.
Yeah,
I love
she
that
she's
name.
yeah, she plays she's in Natasha Hall and she's in Suffrage as well, but she plays two different characters. In Natasha Hall, she plays Natasha's mother, and in Suffrage, she plays the a vice presidential candidate named Daphne Danowski. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I got to reach out and
super
get some of
nice.
these peoples on the show. Yeah, at some point.
Absolutely. Dwayne,
Yep.
man, I hope you got a lot of time for an episode with Dwayne because his stories, you'll be there for hours, man. Like his stories are incredible. He's a really good filmmaker too. He made other than Pulp Fiction, he co-wrote From Dusk Till Dawn 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he also wrote, I mean, he's written a bunch of stuff, but he also wrote and starred in a film called Eddie Presley. That if you haven't seen Eddie Presley, make the time.
You
And
know
he
what's
directed a film. Mhm.
I was going to say, as far as lots of time, I had the guy that wrote Future Noir, the Blade Runner book on here, and he was also on the set for Conan the Barbarian. He came on here and he
Wow,
warned me that he was a talker. The interview went 6 hours.
my gosh, that's almost a quarter of a day.
Yep.
Um, yeah, well, I'll definitely like reach out to Dwayne if because like I think you'd really like. I mean, he's got incredible stories. He made a film in the late '90s called Together and Alone that like
Hmm.
that movie should be up there with like Clerks and Pie and Sex Lies Video, like that, like homegrown like underground movie, like you know what I mean. Together and Alone is superb. Mhm.
Absolutely,
I've
absolutely.
been yeah, I've been very fortunate with the people that I've gotten to work with. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I'm I've grown my reservoir over the years, as it were, of like not only friends but also like actors that I want to work with, or veteran actors that I want to work with, or and and even when we haven't, and there's some actors who like who I'm friends with that we haven't gotten to work together yet, that are ready whenever I've got something for them. And that's one thing about being out here that I haven't quite mastered. It's like, oh, you have so and so like kind of in your back pocket ready to go. Why don't you write something for them? And it's like I I go where the muse takes me. Not, you know what I mean? Like I'm not here to utilize the fact that I know so and so. You know what I mean? Um, so
It's interesting you
yeah,
say
I
that.
I feel
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting you say that because when I started this podcast, I had no idea that it was going to go where it did, and because I used to do this at the CHSR FM here in town, and I started doing it here on Zoom. And it was interesting because it was Lisa Langlois from the film Class of 1984 who invited
mhm.
me to my first convention to assist her at her table, and I couldn't say no to that. And through Lisa. I made a lot of connections, you know, and it was interesting some of the people that I've been able to call friends, you know, and know
Mhm.
outside a movie and see what they're like as people. That's an interesting feeling, you know. Nancy
Yeah.
McLaughlin from Jason Lives is another one that I'm very close with, and she was the one that actually recommended I do Zoom. So
Hmm.
when lockdown happened, so um, yeah, it is an interesting feeling, and yeah, it helps to have some name talent in your films because um, it ups the ante. But it can also, you know, your older films also gives them some highlight as well. It's interesting because when Kevin Smith did Clerks, he didn't have any name talent, but yet this the film he's most known for, you know.
He-
So,
Well, he was very fortunate in that he came on, at a time where getting a movie made was impressive enough for people because it was shot on film.
hmm
And the sad truth is that honestly, like there's not as much respect for people on my level anymore, simply because we're shooting digitally, and that just goes to show that people have no idea what it takes to make a movie. Because like honestly, like the film component of it, that's that's toward the bottom. You know what I mean? Like being able to actually like come up with something that can sustain interest, let alone have meaning, at, for 90 minutes, and then being able to communicate it to dozens of people to actually craft it, and having to adapt to everything that they're bringing to the table so that you can get your vision across even more fully realized with their help. Like that's really fucking hard, and so like nowadays, like and unfortunately, we're also now in the time where everybody who makes a movie is just trying to get into the industry, and they look at it as that this is how I'm going to do it. And I think I started to notice around like, I think 2000. When did Little Miss Sunshine, that one Sundance? I think that's when I was like, well, that's the end of it. Like that's the end of independent film as as its own thing. That now independent film is just a market because it wins Sundance, and it's a multi-million-dollar movie starring Steve Carell, Greg Kinnear, Tony Collette, Alan Arkin, R.I.P., and
yeah, we
Paul
just
Dano.
lost
It's like,
Alan Arkin. Yeah,
I know,
yeah.
I know, such a shame. Great actor, great director.
hmm
Um, but like just Little Miss Sunshine winning and I'm just like, that's not. I'm sorry, like that's not independent. Like it's independent because it wasn't made by Paramount. Okay, you know what I mean? And then I started to notice when I moved out here, you would see movies that came out that were so-called independent movies, and they were just so like obvious. They were
hmm
so like on the money, obvious movies that I would watch something and I would say, "Oh, this guy wants a franchise." You know what I mean? Like that he just wants to get into the industry. That's the majority of independent film that I see. Either it's that most independent film is either people like trying to make a movie that's pretending to be interesting so that they can get into the industry, or it's people who just like want to have fun making a movie, and their movies are kind of meaningless. Which that's not even a criticism necessarily, because like a movie doesn't need meaning as long as it's like spirit. I think is more important than meaning when it comes to filmmaking. but but there's it's actually kind of a tough spot to be in, that like you want to make things. I mean, the whole point of making a movie is to make something people would want to see. Like you don't want to like. And everybody is more and more increasingly afraid of giving audiences a challenge. It's okay to challenge people, and challenge somebody is not inherently antagonistic in a way either. You know what I mean? Like,
hmm
but I'm starting to see more and more where like the slightest bit of challenge is like freaking people out, and that's kind of what I'm dedicated to right now, is that like just not, not allowing the drive to get into the industry. Because here I am now, I've made 14 films. I made 14 features. And we just released our first one earlier this year. Natasha Hall was our first film to get distribution. And I'm still just trying to play it the same way, which is like now, after my 10th film, Lowtown, I kind of was where I wanted to be at creatively. Um, which is to say that like I was ready to be in front of people now, like my movies. Like before then I was making them for friends and families, and like I do like one or two private screenings and invite everybody from town. But like starting with my movie Lowtown, that's where I was like, all right, I'm ready to be in front of people now. I'm ready to be making stuff that asks people who are total strangers, hey, come check this out, you know? And now I'm kind of getting into that place I got into when I left Florida after my fourth movie, where like my resources are starting to fall far behind my ambitions, and so that's the next step, and you'd think that like I could go to anybody and be like, hey, I've made 14 feature length films. I've worked with these kinds of people before, you know what I mean? Whether it's people like, Paul Dooley, John Grice, Ron Thompson, you know, like I obviously know what I'm doing. I'm making genre movies. I have these script ideas. Let's do something. But people these days, it's like it doesn't matter if you've made 14 movies because everybody can make a movie, and it's just not true. I do love Kevin Smith, though, of course. I don't know if you saw, like, yeah, yeah, I do love Kevin.
I was gonna
Um,
say,
and I'm
Natasha Hall, you have Kat Black as your lead, and of course, she's your wife. Um, two-part question here. How did you two meet? And talk about casting her and Natasha Hall as your lead and what the experience was like.
Yeah, so I met Kat in 2018, and a friend of mine was directing a play about Robin Hood. The play was called Marion, I believe, and he was directing it for Theater of Note in Hollywood. And that friend of mine, we used to work together at ArcLight. His name's Christopher Johnson, and he was in a lot of my movies. He's been in a lot of my movies. Like I'm acting like he's not in them anymore. He's in almost all of my movies. First film we worked on together was Hate Horses, actually. Um, and he directed this play, and I went to go see it. And before the play, he had his actors walking around the audience like in character, which is just like, I hated it. I was like, no, don't do that. Like this is, and Kat, she saw me and she clocked me, and her character was this new character named Lady Shirley, who's supposed to be like a two-timing floozy who's like playing both sides, like Robin Hood and the sheriff and all that or whatever. Um, and she like came over and she just started like flirting with me, and I was like, it was just like it was like a nightmare scenario, to be honest. Like I just I'm not that kind of person. I'm not, but the play got she was in the play and she was brilliant in it. There was a few people in that play that night that I thought were great, and so afterward I went to cherry pick the cast, you know. And I met Kat, and we I had a project in mind that I thought she'd be good for, and we met and we had coffee a couple weeks later, and that project never got off the ground. But she and I, over the next year, we would just meet up every couple of months just to like check in about working together. And like I had a few projects at the time that I was working on that didn't take off, and I would do table reads, and I'd invite her over to act in these table reads. And then about a year after getting to know each other, we just went on a date, and we got engaged a few months later, and we got married about a year after that. And we actually got married the week after we wrapped Natasha Hall. We flew to Florida and had our wedding. um and during lockdown, um she was like, um she was putting together like her resume and all this, and she asked me, she was like, hey, who are some actors that you think I'm comparable to, and the first two that came to mind, I was like, you're kind of like Rebecca Hall meets Natasha Lyonne, and she said, "Oh, so Natasha Hall," and I was like, "Hey, it's a good idea." And so I wrote the character for her. I'd been wanting to do a female detective movie for a long time,
Hmm.
um, for years and years and years. And when she said the name Natasha Hall, it just all kind of clicked. And Natasha Hall originally was going to be like Clerks. We were going to shoot during lockdown, and it was going to be all in one apartment. It's going to be a 90-minute, 90s Gen X kind of,
Hmm.
But then I sat down to write it, and it just went in its own direction. I don't get in the way of writing anymore. You know what I mean? Like I go where it takes me, and then I make sure it's not too long in the end. And which is funny because everybody I work with will still tell you it's too long. They're like, "This is too many pages," and I'm like, "Shut up. We'll figure it out in editing." Um, but it was her first time acting in it. We shot a short together. We shot I so the first movie I ever reached out to her about working on was a movie called Yellow Bellies, which is I'm still trying to get that made. That's what I would really like to be my next film. It's about an all-girl Russian punk band who get recruited to assassinate Ronald Reagan at the 1984 Summer Olympics. And I want a cat to be the drummer. And uh, a friend of mine, Rocky Morton, who directed Super Mario Brothers, and he created Max Headroom, and he did
Okay.
that movie DOA with Dennis Quaid. He had a company that they were trying to like make deals about these movies at the time, and he wanted Yellow Bellies to be one of the movies that they tried to get developed with this company they were working with. So I shot a scene from Yellow Bellies, and I put Kat in it, and one of her friends from her acting class, and I also got Charlie Bewley to be in it, who he is just terrific. I love Charlie to death. He's most well known for being in the Twilight films. He plays Dimitri, one of the main Voltaire, the one who Robert Pattinson like fights with in the fifth one and rips his head off and throws him into a chasm. Um,
Okay.
I got the three of them, and we shot it in a day. And I worked with this new DP for the first time, this guy Josh Chiara, and we just all loved working together. So when I wrote Natasha Hall, I wrote it with Kat in mind, with Josh as my DP, and I got the investment to make the movie, most of the investment from these Norwegian filmmakers who I had met, these guys, Per Ingvar Tamren and Raymond Valle, who I had met a year or so beforehand when I starred in a sort of mockumentary that my buddy Bumdog wrote and directed. They were just in town visiting from Norway because they came out for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was being released, and they're huge Tarantino fans. So they came out for like a month and a half, and while they were there, they met Bumdog, and we all made a movie together. And so they helped finance Natasha Hall. They came on board as producers. They made a bunch of props for it and everything. And on this new one on Suffrage, they came out again, and they're in the movie this time, and they helped make props again, and they you know and Kat, she's now, as far as films go, she's only done three movies. She did that short film, the Yellow Belly scene, and Natasha Hall, and the sequel, Suffrage. And Natasha Hall has like a very thick, like New England accent, like Boston, Rhode Island area New England accent. And in Yellow Belly, she's playing a Russian. So like she's on my case. She's like, when are you gonna have me play a character that has my actual voice so that I can make a reel here and people can know that I'm like I sound like your typical American, not like, Um, but her performance in Natasha Hall was like game changer for my movies, where like she was so fully realized in that movie. And I'm not just saying this because she's my wife. Like, I'm not that kind of person. She'd be the first to tell you I'm not that kind of person. Be like, oh, you were great. No, like her performance. Like I remember looking at the monitor with the focus puller on Natasha Hall, the AC, uh, my buddy AJ, and we were watching Kat on the monitor in some of these close-ups, and we'd just be like looking at each other like, how the fuck is she doing this? Like, how is she, And the first film festival we submitted to, Kat won best performance, not just best actress, but literally like best performance, like right out of the gate. Her first movie, her first first festival, first nomination, and she won the whole damn thing, you know, and rightfully so, like rightfully so. She's the best thing about the movie. Um, and it's tough working, you know, like with your spouse, and also both movies that we've made, we've worked in like um weird times. So like Suffrage, we shot around Christmas time, and Natasha Hall 1, like I said, we shot during lockdown the week before our, you know, right before our wedding. So we had all this to deal with. And Natasha Hall, the first one especially, we filmed almost all of it at our apartment. So our space was completely invaded for, you know, a month and a half, you know. So it was tough. It was tough. And she was also working full time when we were making Natasha Hall. We would shoot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then she would work doubles Friday, Saturday, Sunday at her job, right? So she's literally doing 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, like
Oh
between the
wow.
shoot, and she had one day off a week, and her home is completely invaded by equipment and props. And we had the movie set in the 90s, so we had to redress our entire house to look like it was 1990 for, you know, 2 months. And then she's also planning our wedding at the time, you know. So she's I've really put her through the ringer. And you know, I like, it's amazing the performance she gives. It's even more amazing when you know what she's up against when she's doing these movies. I've made her a promise. The next one we do, she'll have her own like dressing room, like, and and we'll, you know, it'll be air conditioned. It'll be great. The next one's going to be, you know, it's going to be easy street for her compared to these last two.
Well, I'm hoping that when she's got some time, I'd love to have her come on here and talk about this. But in the meantime, with Natasha Hall and Suffrage under your belt and finished, are you able to deep dive on what you got coming up after that?
Well, you know, Suffrage was when we made Natasha Hall, it didn't, I mean, I love the movie we made. I really loved Natasha Hall, but like it wasn't quite what I had set out to make. I wanted to make like a Fletch kind of movie, or like a Beverly Hills Cop. Like, and we showed the film to Elliot Gould. Um and Elliot like loved the movie, and he started showing it around to people he knew. And one of the guys he showed it to reached out to us and wanted to develop it into a television series for like a new network that he was developing. And so we sat down, and it was kind of cool because I got to kind of go back to the drawing board for Natasha. Like I got to figure out what worked and what didn't work, and you know how I could angle it more into like what I had originally pictured. And you know, and so we developed it for months and months and months, this TV show. And then, you know, as things do all the time out here, it all kind of fell apart. Like the network that it was going to be on fell apart and all that. And I liked what we had developed, and I wanted to have it in my back pocket, you know, just in case another opportunity to do a show came on board. And I felt like what we had turned it into in the development stage was nothing like the movie we had made. Like the movie we had made was a lot more like intense and like introspective and dramatic, and you know, it's still very funny. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't know if you've seen Natasha Hall. It's still a funny movie, but it's not like, it's not Fletch. You know what I mean? For sure. Um, so I came up with the idea that like we should make another Natasha Hall movie that's more in tune with what the TV show would be. That way, you know, that could act as like a teaser or a pilot or something for the show. And
Hmm.
when we brought Natasha Hall to AFM to sell, to get distribution, one of the distributors we talked to told us that they would distribute any future Natasha Hall movies as well because they liked the character. So I had them write up a letter promising that, and I went and found some investment to make, you know, this sequel. And I had this window when the Norwegians would be here where I could make it, and we did. And unfortunately, Josh couldn't do that one, and and so like it looks very different from the first movie, and it was hard. It was the hardest, you know, out of 14 movies I've made. That's the hardest one. That's the or 15 movies, excuse me, 15 movies. That's the hardest one I've ever done. And I like the movie, thankfully, which is not always the case. And um I personally prefer it to the first one, even though I would say that the first one is better, if
Okay.
that makes sense. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Um,
Yep.
but I feel like there's still like a perfect like medium between the two, between Natasha Hall and between Suffrage. And so I have a script um, called Dumb Lucky that that I'd like to do, which is another Natasha Hall movie. And the best way to describe it is it's like a country western take on if Blues Brothers and Midnight Run kind of
Okay.
came together. And and I've talked to Elliot Gould, and he's on board to be in that one too. And but this one though, the budget on Suffrage ended up being about 35,000.
Okay.
The budget for Natasha Hall was 19,000. Um, I but it wasn't enough either time. You know what I mean? It wasn't enough to give people what they needed to do their best work. And so this next Natasha Hall, I'm trying to find like a pretty decent sized budget, which for me is, like 150. You know what I mean? So that I can really bring it to life with the people that I want to work with, and give them the time and the focus that they need to be able to like really bring it to life. So that's kind of the main goal right now, is to do this third Natasha Hall film. And I also would love to make the Yellow Bellies, still the Ronald Reagan assassination movie. That one I've had for God 7 years now. I've been trying to get that made, and but again, like who knows what I'll end up doing next? Like I just had an idea the other day for a movie that I want to make called Bangers, and I started writing that up. So like who knows? Maybe I'll make that one. I don't stop. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
um I've said this before on different podcasts and stuff, but like I equate the way that I make movies to a cartoon. When a cartoon character runs off of a cliff and they're running in midair, and it's not until they stop and look down that they fall. Like that's what movie making is like for me. You just gotta, I know the cliff is far behind. Just keep running. Just don't look down. Don't look down. And hopefully it'll click one day. I'm not a ladder climber. And
Hmm.
again, that's not a criticism of people who are. That's a great way to get to where you want to be. You know what I mean? Like it just, something about that doesn't work for me. And if I'm going to be that kind of person, if I'm going to be stubborn enough to say I'm not going to climb a ladder, then I have to be worthy of that. The work that I'm doing, the art that I'm creating, and the kind of person I am, both as a creator, as a coworker, as a friend, as a husband, I have to be worthy of that, so that the movies are worth the time, if that makes sense.
Oh
And
yeah.
and that's my focus. My focus is to stay true to that, is to make things that I see, to make things that have purpose and value, and to make things that are open-minded but strong in their beliefs, and to make things that are entertaining as a way to communicate. That's and sometimes that means making like an in-depth character drama, and sometimes that means telling my wife to run around the apartment on all fours with a pickle in her mouth and a gun in the hand while she's farting. You know what I mean? Like that's it. It could be anything. So
Have
that's
you shot? Have
yeah,
you shot
and
that scene?
that's Natasha Hall. Yeah, that's in Natasha Hall. It's yeah, and Ron, it's so funny whenever I make something, um, and I don't have Ron. Like I couldn't have Ron involved with Natasha Hall because of lockdown and everything,
Hmm.
And he got on me so hard. He's like, I'm still mad to this day that I'm not Natasha Hall. And I was like, well, and I made it up to him in Suffrage. I brought back his character from Tellers and got him to do that one more time. But we did, Ron is so multi-talented that on Natasha Hall, Ron recorded some R&B songs in the
Oh,
in
yeah, he
the
told me about that.
60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we put those in the movie. You know what I mean? Like I have him as involved as possible. And another one I did with him, or that he wasn't in years ago, My Non-Wife. I couldn't afford to make it union, and he's a union actor. I He had a song that he had written years ago that he had never recorded. So I got some musicians together and we recorded that song and made it the opening song. Like you know, he's like the Will Smith to my Barry Sonnenfeld, you know. Um, that's how I think of him. You know, I don't want to make a movie without Ron Thompson.
Oh, I don't
Um,
blame you.
yeah, yeah, he's a gas, you know, but like not even just the people that like, you know, the veteran actors that I've worked with. Like I've worked with like some like there's some people who because you work with friends, you know, when you're working at my level, friends and family members or, you know, whatever, other aspiring actors. And I'm the kind of guy that like I get inspired by people. So I write something for them, you know, and then kind of see what they bring. And some people it works out great, you know, and like I've got a friend, Vincent Zahedi, who he's been in my movies now for 9 years, just ever climbing like in size and scale. You know, the last movie we just did, Sufferage, he got to be in scenes with Dwayne Whitaker, and he got to be in scenes with Diane Goldner, who's uh, from Feast, and she's also in like Halloween too. She's John Gulager's wife, Clu Gulager's daughter-in-law. I don't know if you know those guys.
Yep.
And you know, like there's so many people that have been with me for so long, and that's also becoming like kind of this the hurdle, if you will, is that like I'm so grateful to them that I want to like thank them for this lifetime at this point almost. You know, I've been making movies for the majority of my life. I made my first feature length film when I was 17 years old. You know, so I've more than half my life I've been making films, you know, and there's some people who've been with me from movie one, you know, or from before movie one who are still there,
Yep.
you know. Um and so honoring all these intentions and all of these people is becoming really, really it's like the cat in the hat when he's on that ball and you know he's holding all the stuff in his hands, you know what I mean? And but it's you know I wouldn't have it any other way, you know, and as long as my wife is okay with me, you know, like living paycheck to paycheck until we make it happen, like I'll keep doing it.
Is Natasha Hall
So
or any of your other films on Blu-ray?
all of my films right now you can buy on Blu-ray except for Hate Horses.
Okay.
Um on my web on my website, but
Oh,
only through my website.
okay,
Um
plug your website on here.
yeah, it's bluemeanspregnantfilms.com. That's my company name is Blue Means Pregnant. Yeah, so
Okay.
bluemeanspregnantfilms.com. Yes, that is a Kill Bill 2 reference, even though as I said earlier, I don't like that movie. Um, but on that website, you can actually watch. For now, we actually might be striking a deal with our distributor to release these films and a little more professionally. But as of right now, you can watch almost all of my films on that website. Hate Horses, Natasha Hall, and Suffrage are not on that website. Those are not available. But everything else is available on that website, as well as all of my short films and a bunch of feature length making of documentaries for a lot of my films
Okay.
are available on that website as well. And then there is a page where if you can contact me directly and you can buy. I have Blu-rays of all of them that are available to stream, you know, that are on the website. You can buy those from me. Natasha Hall, though, Natasha Hall is available on Amazon, on Prime Video on Amazon.
I'm still a physical media kind of guy, so I know that's becoming a
Me too.
dying thing, but yeah,
Not in my household.
yeah.
No, I'm there with you. That's why I have them. That you know what I mean. I made all these Blu-rays. I had never released my stuff at all. Um, well, that's not true. I used to when I would screen my movies in Florida, I would make DVDs and sell them at the screenings.
Hmm.
So Hatchet Sisters, Doable, and Yellow Bellies, the original Yellow Bellies, those were I made DVDs of those. But since then, I had not put anything on physical media. And during lockdown, I was like, well, what am I going to do with my time? So I actually went back and I like remastered all of my movies. Like I redid all the sound. I even my wife and I shot like new inserts and stuff like that for things that I had been like. There's one movie I did called The Setup, which is the first movie I showed Ron that I had made. It was my first movie I made in LA, where a character pulls a thumb drive out of a ring box, and I for 8 years I was always so mad that I never got an insert of the thumb drive, and so like we my wife and I you know shot an insert of that thumb drive and I threw it in the movie finally, you know, and then I made hours of special features for all of these movies. Like I did behind the scenes documentaries, I did commentaries, I did uh I put short films on there. I Some of the movies didn't have trailers, so I made trailers for them. I mean, I went all out, and I made, um so I finally, yeah, and I hand printed them, and I burned them, and I hand wrote everything, made all the labels, like I did it all by hand. Thousands of Blu-rays. My wife was our studio apartment was filled to the brim with them. And they're there because I believe in physical media as well. I mean,
Hmm.
and we're learning more and more how important that kind of stuff is. I mean, look what happened here with the French Connection. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
love that
like,
movie.
yeah. Well, Disney. I'm sure you heard Disney. Cut out a scene from it. Now they own the rights to it. They cut out a scene from it, so it's only available now on streaming with this scene omitted, and because of use of offensive language. So like the Blu-rays that came out before Disney got their hands on it are now like, gold. They're coveted at this point. You know what I mean? Because like that could be the last time, and look at this, Star Wars, like, hope everybody held on to their laser discs of Star Wars, you know what I mean? Because like they, Lucas and now Disney, they just released these modified versions. So if you want your OG Star Wars, you've got your laserdisc transfers of the originals, or now somebody released those 35 millimeter scans, but you get what I'm saying, that like physical media is very important. And we're not quite at the level now where a distribution company will invest that kind of time and money into us, which is fair. You know what I mean? Like that's really fair. Who the fuck are we in the business world right now? I will say that I feel creatively myself and the people I work with are worth the investment for sure. Um, Um, but like we don't have anything to give them yet that is, if that makes sense. So, um, yeah, on bluemeanspregnantfilms.com, you can watch everything. You can buy the Blu-rays and support us. I have links to like all our main collaborators. You can follow all their careers. There's a blog on there that I post to, and all the other various podcasts that I'm on. I put the Kevin Smith podcast that I was on up there the other day. um that's the best place to reach out to us, for sure.
Well, do you ever get to do the conventions?
Like go to them, like,
Go or even sell your movies there?
no, um I've been to AFM a couple of times, but
Hmm.
like my movies aren't really convention friendly. Conventions are really for like hard genre movies, like, and while my movies they're genre movies, they're not like hard genre. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They're not um like and I did used to go to conventions back in the day. I actually met John Landis at a convention
Oh, nice.
years ago, and yeah, that was a game changer. And he like 5 years later out here in LA, he like remembered me, and we used to have a pretty good friendship there before I kind of moved out of LA into Pasadena. I also met Jason Mewes at a convention, Jay of Jay and Silent Bob, and
Hmm.
he was the first person to flat out say like get out of Florida, move to LA, and I did. And the first professional project I worked on out here in LA was on Kevin Smith's uh Hollow Ian, which was
Okay.
a short film. And Jay, I was supposed to be like an unpaid intern, on that, like, and Jason Mewes remembered me, and like was really like proud of me for coming out there, and he got me paid on that one, like, as a way to congratulate me for coming out. Like it was really nice of him. Good dude.
Hmm.
um but I have not been to a convention. I did go one time to talk to Billy Zane. um I had to talk to Billy Zane about working on a project. But outside of that, no, the convention world kind of like eludes me.
What
You
was
know,
it like talking to Billy Zane?
I mean, what
Was
is it
he?
like looking God in the eye?
Well,
Like I
I
like.
heard he's pretty nuts. That's what they say.
Oh, that's my kind of person. Though. Have you met Ron Thompson? Yeah, no. Billy Zane is I have I have one actress that is still on my I absolutely have to work with this person, and I have two actors who are on that list. Like, I mean, there's dozens that I want to work with, but there's
Mhm.
only like these three that I still like. I have to work with these people no matter what. And that's Tori Spelling,
Okay.
who she and we've almost worked together a few times. I met her outside of a Chili's in Encino, and
Okay.
she put in she we hit it off, and she actually installed Instagram on my phone so that we could communicate with each other through Instagram.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Okay.
um, and then still haven't worked with her yet though. We've gotten close twice, so third time's a charm. Um, and Patrick Fischler is on that list. He's a character actor who's in everything. My favorite is him in Speed. He's Bob, the guy in the elevator who pushes the
Yep.
button, and the
Yep.
guy's like,
Okay.
"Jesus, Bob, what button did you push?" Yeah, that guy, love him. I want to work with him, and I want to work with Billy Zane. Those are the three like big guns that like I have to work with. And yeah, like I also like whenever I work with somebody like a veteran actor, I always have them sign a copy of my favorite thing that they've done and or something my favorite performance of theirs. You know what I mean? Like I just worked with Dan Roebuck on
Yep.
Suffrage, and I had him play I had him sign Dudes, um,
Okay. I've
which
interviewed
is one of
Catherine
my
Mary Stewart.
oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Dudes is what a forgotten masterpiece that movie is. But
I could
even
put
Dan,
you.
when I had him sign, he's like,
I could put you in touch with Catherine Mary Stewart.
"Oh, very cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Dudes is Penelope Sphere is like it's so funny with this like big boom of like female filmmakers, getting to shine here. It's like, I mean, she's like semi-retired from what I understand, but she to me is like one of the greats. I mean, the same woman who did, you know, Dudes, did Wayne's World, did you know what I mean? Like she's an absolute legend. Um, but yeah, that's where I get my like autograph hounding in is when I work with these people. I get them. I worked with Greg Rainwater, who was T-Hawk in Street Fighter. I
Okay.
had him sign that. Yeah, like so that's where I kind of get my fanboy comes out when I work with these people, and um,
Did you get Ron Thompson to
yeah,
sign American Pop?
absolutely. Yep.
There you
I had
go.
him sign American Pop. I had Paul Dooley sign A Perfect Couple, and I had Dominique Swain sign Smokers. Um,
Okay.
when I made Hate Horses. Yeah, those are the Billy Zane and John Landis are the only two people who I have autographs from that I've yet to work with.
What'd you
Um,
get John
I
Landis to sign?
the Stupids. Yeah, yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. When I made Doable, actually, our morning ritual before we would start our day shooting is once the cast and crew showed up, we'd watch like 6 or 7 minutes of the Stupids, um, as like inspiration for the day. And actually,
That's funny.
that was in 2000. Yeah, I love that movie. It's a masterpiece. That movie's brilliant. No pun intended. Like The Stupids is brilliant. But I that was 2009 when he signed that for me. And in 2014 I ran into him again for the first time in 5 years out in LA. And I was like, "I don't know if you'll remember me." And he's like, "Joe Black." And I was like, "How the fuck did you?" And he told me, he said that in his 20 years of doing conventions, that I was the only person who had ever asked him to sign a copy of The Stupids, and that was his favorite favorite screenplay he ever got to direct.
We didn't get the
So
Stupids here, but I really wanted to see it. My favorite Landis movie, and he's done a number I like, but my favorite is The Blues Brothers.
that's my
You know,
favorite movie, like
yeah,
period, is The Blues Brothers.
I
Like,
love The Blues
like,
Brothers.
yeah, that's my favorite movie of all time. Is The Blues Brothers. But
I've
like,
interviewed three of the Blues Brothers band.
amazing,
Yeah, Murphy Dunn's been
amazing.
on here. Willie Hall's been on
Oh,
here, and
Mad Guitar
Blue.
Murphy.
No, no, Willie Hall.
Wow.
Murphy Dunn. Murphy Dunn was the keyboardist.
Oh, done. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I
I'm sorry. I've
had
seen that. Yeah.
Willie Hall, the drummer, and I had Blue Lou, the saxophonist. And boy, did they tell some stories, especially about John Belushi. And and I had this woman that was involved in the wrecking of the mall too, doing stunts, and so I was
Wow.
involved with that.
Yeah, that
So
to me, the Blues Brothers is just like it's nothing about that movie is how a movie is supposed to be, you know?
mhm.
And like and yet every step of the way it's perfection. But Landis, like the most it's the Landis movie that's inspired my work the most though, is Into the Night.
Okay.
Um, which super underrated. And he made that during the trials, during the Twilight Zone trials.
Yeah,
And
I think that hurt him right there was the Twilight Zone thing. Did a lot
yeah, I
of
mean, yes
damage
and
to him.
no. I mean, well, yeah, but like after that, I mean, he still did Three Amigos. He still did Coming to America. He still
Yep.
did, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like he was still, but like, he's in Into the Night. I don't know if you've seen Into the Night. He's in that movie, and there's a scene where his character. This is spoilers, but sorry, you've had 40 years to see it. If you haven't, his character's running from the police in an airport and he gets shot. And when he gets shot, he flies up against a magazine news rack, like in a crucifix position. And he's literally up against the news rack in a crucifix position and just gets annihilated with machine gun fire against this, news rack. And there's definitely a visual metaphor going on there. You know what I mean? To like how he was feeling at the time. Um,
Hmm.
I think he's one of the greatest directors that's ever lived. I actually, for my money, I don't think he made a bad movie. I love all of his films.
Hmm.
And in fact, I just worked with Eric Roberts.
I'm
Um,
in a scene with Eric Roberts in James Balsamo's It Wants Blood. And
cool,
Eric Roberts is watching me on a television. So
awesome,
I just
awesome.
shot my scene and sent it to James, and James spliced it in there. I haven't had Eric on here yet, and I got to get him on here at some point because it's like we're in a scene together, even though we had never met.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, he came on board for Suffrage. We originally were going to have Elliot Gould, but then we had some setbacks that made that not an option, and so Eric Roberts. I rewrote it for him because I've wanted to work with him for so long. I love Inherent Vice. That's like my second favorite movie. And his scene as Mickey Wolfman is just like one of the great all-time great scenes to me. Like, and so I rewrote it for him specifically and I sent it to him and they came on board. So he shows up that day and he brings his wife with him, Eliza,
He's an Animal
and
House. Yep.
she well, yeah, that's the thing. I didn't place it. And Eric was like, yeah, my wife, like I mentioned John Landis. And she's like, that's your friend, Eliza. And she's like, oh yeah. I was like, wait, oh, you're an Animal House. Huh? And she's like, yeah, I was also in Schlock. I was the lead in Schlock. And I almost fainted. I was like, oh my God, you're Blind Mindy from Schlock. And my buddy, my producer, who I've known now for 21 years, we used to watch Schlock all the time together, and he was there that day, and like we could barely even talk to her after that because we were so like starstruck that like Schlock's love interest is here today. Like as cool as it was to work with Eric Roberts, I was definitely more starstruck that like I was getting to talk to Blind Mindy that day. It's funny. Um, Eric told me a story that day because I had him sign Inherent Vice. That was the movie I had him sign that day. And he says to me, he's like, you like this movie? And I said, yeah. And he goes, let me ask you something. Did you understand it? And I said, yeah, yeah, I do. And he goes, great. Can you explain it to me? And I asked, I, and he said to me, he's like, on the day I was filming, he said, on the day I was filming, halfway through the day, I was like, I have no fucking idea what's going on. And I said to Paul, I was like, Paul, I'm sorry, man. I'm totally lost. And he said, Paul popped up from behind the camera and gave me two thumbs up and said, lost is good. Lost is good. Um,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, yeah. But back to it, Landis, I would love to work with Landis. I actually, if fate would allow it, I'm in the Natasha Hall movies.
Hmm.
I actually replaced an actor who was in it originally. We did a reshoot, and I took over, and and I'm in Suffrage. I my character's father is in Dumb Lucky, and I really would love to finagle getting John Landis to be in the movie as my father. I think that he could. I think that we could. I think we can work that out.
Oh, that'd
That's
be
on the
great.
goal list for. Yeah, yeah, that'd be cool.
Absolutely,
That's what I
absolutely.
want people to say about my movies. My favorite filmmakers of all time are John Cassavetes, Woody Allen, Robert Altman, John Landis, and Kevin Smith. Those are my guys. And I hope to make something that's like a perfect like slushy of all of them. You know what I mean? Um, but out of all of them, I think Landis is the only one with like a flawless filmography.
Okay,
So yeah.
okay.
To Woody's
Yep.
credit, he's made like three times as many movies though. So, and
Hmm.
there's only like four or five Woody Allen movies that I don't like, but Landis, even Oscar, you know what I mean, which is like most people consider that, or like his last movie, Burke and Hare. I'm like, both those work for me. Like,
Okay.
they're comedies and I'm laughing. So what else can you
Hmm.
ask for?
Hmm. No, I like Landis. That goes way back with me, absolutely. I have a few filmmakers I really like. Like I'm a big Hitchcock fan. Kubrick, I really like. You mentioned Woody Allen. Love Woody Allen. And I could think of a
I don't know if
lot
you
of
could
other
see my.
ones.
I don't know if you. Oh, you can't really see it. I have a gigantic Woody Allen uh
Oh,
uh thing, just to give you a sense of the size of this thing. Like this
yeah.
is
I'm
like
trying to think what movie that's from.
um well, that's Juliet Taylor, his casting director.
Oh,
Um
okay.
and I'm not sure what that looks like. Mid 80s. That might be another woman that's from. Um but and
Mm-hmm.
I also have like a tattoo of Woody Allen and Adam Sandler on the Bill and Ted phone booth. Um yeah, I'm a big Woody Allen guy.
I like Woody
Yeah.
Allen, especially stuff like I really enjoyed Deconstructing Harry a lot. I enjoyed
That was
everyone.
written for Elliot Gould.
Mm-hmm.
That was originally written for Elliot Gould.
Yeah, and I
Harry
liked
and Deconstructing Harry.
everyone says I love you was really good. I liked what else did he do that I really liked? Small Time Crooks. I laughed at, loved that.
That's
Um
cool that these are all kind of back to back, like because you got everyone says I love you, and then Deconstructing Harry is next,
mhm.
and then um Sweet and Lowdown, then Small Time Crooks, but those are all
Yeah,
almost back to
Sweet and
back.
Low Down, yeah. And I like a lot of the stuff he did in the 70s, like Annie Hall, for example, you get a mention, and um Hannah and her sisters, he did in the 80s, and but a lot of
Hmm.
people know what those
I
are. And
Broadway Danny Rose is one of the biggest influences on my movies. His
mhm,
movie Broadway Danny Rose, like there's sparks of that in half the movies I made. I actually like some of this later era stuff like a lot. Like I think that Vicky Cristina Barcelona is one of his best
mhm.
films. I think
Yeah.
that Cafe Society is terrific, and Irrational Man, and uh, I actually really loved Rainy Day in New York, and Rifkin's Festival was actually really good. The last one he did, I think he's still got it. You know what I
What
mean?
is the one? I'm trying to think of the name of the one where he did oh, what was it called? To Something with Love.
To
That
Rome with
involved
Love.
To Rome with Love, with involved the shower singing and the
Yeah,
opera.
yeah. But see, I like his story in that, but that's one of the ones that I don't think works. There's like three or four that I don't think works. Like that one,
Okay.
whatever works, funny enough, I don't think is very good. And but I'm also I Cassandra's Dream, that's another one that I don't think is very good. But I actually don't like Crimes and Misdemeanors. I think that movie's really bad. And what's funny is he seems to be the only person in the world who agrees with me. Like everyone else, when I tell them I don't like that movie, they're like, "You're crazy. That's one of his best." And Woody Allen is like the only other person who's like, "I failed that time."
I like Manhattan
I
Murder
think he's done.
Mystery.
Oh yeah, I mean that's another one that like I wrote a script a few years ago that's very in tune with that. It's called Who You Know. It's about a married a married couple on their honeymoon in Hollywood, and they're each 30 years old, and they just got married, but they've been dating since they were in kindergarten. So even though they just got married, they've been together for 25 years. So they like fight like an old married couple, and they get involved in like a murder mystery thing on there. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to make that one day. Who You Know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, scenes from the mall. Like, I remember all these movies. Yep.
Well,
Um,
that's Mazursky. He's just in that one. That's not a Woody Allen movie.
oh, that's right.
That's
That's
Paul
that's
Mazursky.
right. That's right. I'm
That's a
so
good one
used
though.
to,
I,
yep. I'm so used to
yeah, that's
Woody Allen directing his own stuff. I forget that some he's actually appeared in other people's films, but
I
even
think it was
doing the
Joaquin Phoenix who said that. Well, Joaquin Phoenix, I remember. Sorry, no, I was just saying that Joaquin Phoenix mentioned that his performance, Woody Allen's performance, I think in Manhattan, he said, is one of the performances that made him want to be an actor. That like Woody is
okay.
actually a very underrated actor.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else
Yeah.
that you want to plug on here before we close off? Plug your
No, I
website one
mean
more
not
time.
really. Bluemeanspregnantfilms.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I said, everything's on there. Like the whole spectrum of my career and the career of the people that I've worked with, and yeah, it's the best place to get in touch with us. And especially if you're in like the LA area, come on board. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're a wide cast net of creators, and all looking to help each other out. So
Absolutely. And we'll be looking for Tori Spelling and Billy Zane in a movie soon, directed by you.
that's when everyone will know that I've made it. Billy Zane and Tori Spelling in the same movie. I will give that gift to the world.
There you go. There you go.
They could play like brother and sister.
There you go.
That's actually not a half bad idea. I just saw that Billy Zane movie, This World and the Fireworks, where he and Gina Gershon play incestuous twins. Have you seen that
Oh,
movie?
I know, but I like Gina Gershon.
90s Billy Zane, I'm telling you, Blood and Concrete. That's the hidden Billy Zane gem if any of your listeners want to see
Hmm.
it, like a real like Blood and Concrete. It's pretty fucking incredible. Um, but yeah, I appreciate you letting me come on here and taking the time to hear our story. The only way that we get to do any of this stuff is with support, and support of friends and family. I mean, my parents, my mom and dad, they supported me and my brother my whole life. We literally had nothing growing up except for support. You know what I
Well,
mean? And it goes on to this day. So like, we appreciate all the support we get and we appreciate all the connections we make. So
special shout out to Ron Thompson for speaking so highly of you, and he recommended you, so I said sure.
he better. No, no. Yeah, I mean, I love Ron to death, and I'm so glad you guys had him on. He's another person just full of great stories and great adventures. And yeah, I look forward to putting you in touch with some people here and hopefully get them on your show.
Yes, yes, I'd love to have Kat on, and some of those other the two from Pulp Fiction I wouldn't mind having on here too. And oh, who else?
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
there's others.
you should have Damon Packard on. You should look up Damon Packard's work, and
Hmm.
I'll send you a link. He actually had Kat and I star in a short film here a few months ago called um, "Howl of the Unvaccinated," and
Okay.
it's like a Christmas horror comedy gonzo psychotic 20-minute movie that I've never been more proud of my life than to have been asked to star in a Damon Packard film. But I'll send you some of his stuff, and then you should have him on. He's a really interesting cat.
All right. Will do. Will do.
Oh, yeah. All
Well,
right, man. Well, thank you
let
very
you
much.
before I let you go,
Yeah,
I'd love a plug for my show.
do it. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
state your name and say you're the director of Natasha Hall, and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise. My name is Joe Black, director of Natasha Hall, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
And then
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, and then you forgot the part where you say, Ron Thompson, I'm putting you in my will.
Oh yeah, yeah. But just know that I have a big eraser, so don't piss me off.
God bless you. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Back at you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Later.